Okay, so now that I've gathered some information about this object and I'm becoming more familiar with it, I've been introducing myself, becoming friends, as it were. The I want to start transferring the drawing to my actual paper. A couple comments first. One of the reasons I do start with drawing from photographs, there's several schools of thought out there on what the best way to begin learning how to draw is. And the reason that I'm a fan of learning to draw from photographs is, back to my juggling analogy, there's so many things that you're sort of already juggling to try to draw this object in an enjoyable and accurate fashion. There's nothing going on when the image is already sort of flattened for us. When you're drawing from life, which is a wonderful thing to do as well, there's just a lot more things to juggle. So learning some of these initial concepts is simpler when we don't have to worry about moving back and forth, and a lot of the stuff is already taken care of already because of it's been captured by this photograph. So the other comment I wanted to say was that really at the beginning of a drawing, which is probably, it might be sort of this odd concept, I know it was to me for a long time, I'm not doing any I'm really not doing much drawing, if any, that's going to be final marks of my drawing. I'm not even thinking about that yet. All I'm doing is trying to lay an accurate foundation, what's sometimes called blocking in. But the idea is that I'm going to get an accurate big picture before I start really coming in to make my final marks. Because once you make a final mark, that's really hard to change. It can be hard literally if it's dug into the paper, and it's also just sort of emotionally kind of hard to justify changing something a lot if you really sort of spent a lot of time making sure that line was really cool looking, but once you figure out that it's really at the wrong angle, it's tempting to just say, oh heck, I'm going to leave it like that. So certainly your choice, but I won't be sort of talking about making final marks till I've really done this block in, which is what I'm called. So, speaking of the block-in, there's several different ways to kind of measure things and transfer them. Some are extremely cumbersome, it sort of runs the gamut between extremely cumbersome and ruler-oriented or intense measuring and exact, all the way to just sort of, oh heck, I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. So I feel like I try to go sort of in the middle. I am gonna talk about at some point, not right now so much, but understanding the notion of what proportions this actual bounding box is by comparing whichever is shorter, a shorter distance, either the vertical sides or the horizontal. In this case, the horizontals are shorter distance than the verticals. Like I said, I'll talk about that more later. But that's one way to. Well, that was interesting. I feel like sometimes I'm doing these things, and I want to. While I'm videotaping these and talking about it, I do want to capture interesting moments that I encourage you to capture as well. I just sort of realized that this point is pretty darn close to what a perfect square would be if I created a square out of that bounding box. I'm not going to get. Anyways, hopefully when you these cool things you stumble across these cool things. You won't be so structured to exactly what you have to do to and what the procedure is that you won't be able to enjoy that and learn something new and say, hey, that's kind of cool, and have fun, heaven forbid. So back to what I was talking about, when I think of trying to measure and transfer accurately, like I was touching on, trying to explain, was this notion of triangulation. And for me and lots of other folks, it seems to be the best combination of accurate and not too crazy cumbersome. So I'm going to try to block this in using that notion of triangulation. First, I'm going to look at the distance from here to here. I'm going to think about the angle between those 2 points. And I'm going to do a couple things to help me understand that angle. I can use my pencil like this and bring it over here, not shifting it, and sort of understand that angle. The other thing I can do is imagine if I was completing sort of a right triangle, this negative shape right here. That will help me sort of understand about that angle as well. I'm not worried about making it the exact same dimensions as this kite, which is one of the things I like about triangulation. It's a little bit more forgiving, and that it's easier to scale up and scale down, in my opinion. So, as I'm starting to just sort of make some of these initial indicators, I'm sketching that line to kind of see if that seems about the right angle. And that's good enough for me for right now. So let's say that well, hold on a second. Let me actually practice what I'm preaching here. This triangle looks somewhat like this triangle. One of the tricky things, another tricky thing in recording videos is that everything you're looking at here is at angles, I understand. And so there's sort of inherent confusion with perspective and just how you're looking at one thing and I'm drawing over here. But so that's sort of one thing I might think about like that. And now that I know these 2 points, I'm going to use, this was sort of one version of triangulation. But I think the main thing I want to try to get across with triangulation is the notion of using 2 points that I'm confident about to determine a third point. And in this case, the third point I want to think about is this one right here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to think about this point pointing to that, and I'm also going to think about this point. These are the 2 points that I'm pretty confident of. So I'm going to use those 2 points to help me find this third point. And I like to sort of imagine that they're both pointing towards there, saying, it's over there, it's over there, it's over there. And so as I'm drawing this, I'm going to sketch in very lightly, once again, this guideline of try to sort of emulate this angle. I'm might use that guy as well. To get a sense of that, how steep this angle is. But I don't really know where to stop yet at this point. And that's where this other point comes in. This other point is basically telling me, okay, that's where I intersect with you, that's where you need to stop. So I'm going to make this mark right here. I'm going to, let me see, this might be easier for both you and me. I might use my other hand to sort of help me keep it straight. It didn't work so well, but seems like it's sort of in between there. This is a curvy line, so so it's helping me, but I do want to try to imagine what it would be just from that point to that point. So a lot of light sketching for now at the beginning, and then as we continue moving on, we will start making some darker lines. So these two help me find this one. How about if I use this one and this one to help me find this one? I'm going to imagine this is pointing towards that point, and I'm going to imagine that this is pointing towards that point as well. So let's see, this first one I'll just sort of do a long, this is another sort of helpful technique just to draw out the angle, not really worry about where it's stopping. I didn't really do that with this one, did I? Now that I think about it, that might have been a smarter thing to do. But so now I want to check that angle with that angle, and it's close enough for now. It might be a little bit more, but I'm going to go with that angle. So that's this one, and the place where the point's actually going to be is where this imaginary line, it's pointing this way. The angle of that imaginary line is going to intersect this other one. I'm going to test that out a little bit. So that's sort of an initial lay-in. I'm going to call that sort of my initial attempt. And now to help me kind of firm things up, if you will, to start really checking to see just how accurate this is, I'm going to start using triangulation again. I'm going to look at this angle closer again. Look at this angle as well as this angle. And I'm going to imagine this triangle and determine how closely it seems to really relate to the actual triangle I'm trying to emulate. I can tell that's a little curvy. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I feel like this kind of comes up a little bit more. Once you've gotten to the point where you have so many guide marks that you're really not sure what the heck you're trying to look at anymore. Erase the ones that are confusing you. So I've sort of looked at that triangle, and now I'm basically going to keep looking at different combinations of either imaginary or, in this case, in the case of a kite, pretty obvious triangular shapes. If you're drawing something else, there won't necessarily be obvious triangular shapes. But I want to use this line right here, this point to this point, and see what kind of angle that makes. So if I was just to sort of start drawing it from over here, it might be something like that. I'm going to use my pencil and try not to move it. It seems to me that it's a little bit not as steep. It's a little bit more straight like that. So now I'm going to sort of think about that angle, and I'm going to think about this big triangle right here. And does that seem like this big triangle here? And so far it does. And now I want to look at this other triangle here and think about if it looks like this triangle here. And the perspective might be a little odd, but it doesn't look like it to me. So what I think, so this is going to help me sort of, when I just sort of eyeball it, I can tell something's off, and then I'm going to use my triangulation and check my angles to really kind of see where I'm off. And I think part of the problem is that I didn't quite make this angle as accurate as I'd like. And you'll see how a shift in the angle of one is going to shift where the points intersect. And there will be adjusting. I'm straightening this guy out a little bit, that angle. This kite is really helpful because I can sort of see if this triangle seems like this triangle. I can see if this one seems like that one. I can see if this seems like that. So I'm making these little sort of micro adjustments in the angles. I will say it is, if you find yourself adjusting too much of everything, it can drive you a little bit bonkers. It is good to, I usually try not to adjust that initial point, because I want to know at least something that's I'm 100% confident of, and just deciding that that's where I'm starting is one way to do that. So I could have straightened out that line. Never mind. Just keep trying this. I'm going to do a little bit more videos that are just really specifically only about triangulation and different ways of using it. But I wanted to help get you going if you've been having trouble with just all these notions and how to get this kite started drawing. This is interesting because this does come in a little bit, curves in a little bit, and out a little bit. Kind of curves in and then out a little bit and then back down. So that is one thing that I, when I'm starting to get to that detail, that's definitely in the digging into it detail stage. But trying to see if I get these angles correct and transferred over here is really what I'm after. I'm going to use the notion of the notional space to help me look at these triangles even a little bit more. At this point, you may be thinking, good God, I'm just going to spend my entire class with this guy drawing triangles. And, yep, no. I want you to sort of get to a point where understanding how to use 2 points to find a third becomes so second nature that you're not even thinking about it. I feel like it's one of the skills that a lot of people who draw well just sort of automatically kind of have figured out. And I see people doing it all the time, just using sort of quick notions of triangulations without really explaining what it is they're doing. I can tell that that triangle is not the same as this one. This seems more like a equilateral, whereas this side seems it's shorter. So these are the kinds of things that these triangles will help me really kind of figure out how to adjust. And as I keep getting better at eyeballing and adjusting angles, the more accurate my drawings will be. So that's enough for just this initial block in. And I encourage you to do it with a kite. I encourage you to find images of individual objects. Like I said, I think it is much easier to do this from a photograph where you're identifying these points because they're literally, they're easier to find and aren't going to move around and yeah. But try that, and I'm going to go into a little bit more on continuing on with this drawing in the next video.